it makes you feel like there's something in that docket 375 that GININDA and Baloyi are fighting so hard to not have see the light of day. The purpose of Mngomezulu's cross-examination, in my opinion, was just to show how useless this witness was to the court. See how uncredible these witnesses are. Mohola, that DNA never matched the people that are before the court either. So what is GININDA trying to say? Earlier on, you said that the first time you saw the docket was in 2020. Now you're telling the courts that the first time you saw this docket was in 2022, when the case had already started. GININDA, which one is it? No, I'm educated enough. I don't need more education from Baloyi. So right now, he's just here to wrap up this nonsense of a case.
And I'm bad like the Barbie. I'm a doll, but I still wanna party. Being felt like I'm ready to bend. I'm a 10, so I pull in a 10. Like Daddy, all of the Barbies is pretty. Damn, all of the bodies is bad.
Hello and welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Ndombela, also known as Kwazi Bear on all social media platforms. Do subscribe, be a part of this family, and if you are a returning subscriber, welcome back, darling. Now guys, as you know, every week I bring you updates in the Senzo Meyiwa trial, so I'm here to do exactly that. Before we get into this video, make sure that you like the video before you continue watching. Make sure that you comment down below and engage with me so that my video does get recommended to other users. And then lastly, if you can, please do super thanks the channel. Let's get right into the proceedings for the week. I am finding it very interesting that every time we upload videos on either podcasts or do lives on social media, it seems like the people in the courts actually watch our videos and listen to us, because most of the things that we bring up in our videos do get brought up in court. I don't know if it's coincidence or what, but I've noticed that kind of trend. So on Monday, the 14th of October, we had Mrs. Pretorius on the stand to continue leading evidence with regards to Longwe Twala's tracker information. Now, the very interesting thing about Longwe's movements after the shooting of Senzo Meyiwa is the speed in which his vehicle was traveling at. I'm not trying to make any assumptions or anything, but the car was traveling at literally 17 kilometers per hour at some points, even 20 kilometers per hour, nothing over 50 kilometers an hour after Senzo Meyiwa was shot and killed. Now, I asked myself, where was the sense of urgency? Just immediately after Senzo was shot, when driving to the hospital, there seemed to be no urgency in the tracker of Longwe Twala. The car was driving very slowly at about 17 kilometers an hour to the hospital. And even the following day, the movements of the car reflect that the car was traveling very, very slowly. So it does raise a bit of eyebrows as to why was the car traveling at such a low speed. And what I would have been interested in is knowing how this car was traveling before the incident of Senzo Meyiwa's shooting. Baloyi completed his evidence in chief with the witness, and then Mngomezulu began his cross-examination. Now, the purpose of Mngomezulu's cross-examination, in my opinion, was just to show how useless this witness was to the court, because he asked a few questions that the witness was unable to answer, which are questions that I was asking myself as well, because this person no longer works for the tracking company, yet she is here testifying on behalf of the tracking company. It did not make sense to me, but I thought, you know what, the defense might actually not ask any questions. But Mngomezulu asked a few questions. The first question being, who fitted the tracker into the vehicle? The lady had no knowledge of that information. She said it's on the system and she no longer has access to the system, which doesn't assist the court in any way at this point. Mngomezulu asked which branch was the car fitted. She had no answer because she no longer has access to the system, so she doesn't have this information. When was the tracker fitted? She was unable to tell us. So it just comes to show that she came here to tell us the information with regards to the tracker, but she is a useless witness because she's unable to assist with the questions that pertain to this particular tracker at the moment, because she's no longer an employee. And if you listen to my previous video, I did touch on this. How is she testifying on behalf of a company that she no longer works for? It does not make sense. When we saw Vodacom coming in to testify, we were able to find every single information relating to those cell phone numbers with Pinky Vi filling her him. However, with this person, there are certain information and certain issues that she's unable to touch on because she no longer works for the company. The rest of the defense, as expected, had no cross-examination for this witness, which prompted GININDA to come to court. However, he was unavailable on Monday and he would be writing exams Tuesday and Wednesday, so he would only be available on Thursday the 17th of October. On Thursday the 17th of October, GININDA was finally on the stand. The much anticipated GININDA was on the stand and Baloyi began to lead him. Most of the issues that Baloyi touched on when leading GININDA was the information that he had already supplied before the court. So he didn't go into much detail about his career and experience and all that, because all that information is already in the trial within a trial, is already on the record. So if you do remember, GININDA has testified in this case in the trial within a trial where they were trying to determine the admissibility of the confessions from accused number 1 and 2. So right now he's just here to wrap up this nonsense of a case. In the beginning of the examination in chief, Baloyi basically touches on the issue of docket case 375/1 of 2019, which GININDA says is an obstruction of justice docket, and there's no murder charge in this docket. Now, I was reminded, I myself thought that 375 was a defeating the ends of justice docket. However, I was referred back to the record where Mshololo was cross-examining Utumelo, and she read out a document that says that should this case 636 not be prosecuted or the accused not be found guilty, then there will be a 375 which will then come into action. And in the docket, when Mshololo specifies the charges in the docket, she does mention murder as part of the charges in that docket. It's murder and defeating the ends of justice. But GININDA has told the court that it is just defeating the ends of justice. Then GININDA gets into explaining how he became involved in this particular case and how Makubo and Buthelezi also played a role in investigating case 636. And he does mention a gentleman by the name of Ramuhale, who was also part of the investigation, but he is now retired. He does tell the court, which is interesting for me, I found it very interesting that GININDA told the court that he was briefed and he was given a report by the people that were investigating this case previously, and there was a belief that there were no intruders that entered the house. And he even goes as far as saying he himself believed that there were no intruders at some point. But then he also says that after reading through the dockets and perusing the dockets, he then sort of changed his mind about the fact that there were no intruders, and he believed that there were intruders that entered the house. One of the first things that he says he did when he was put in charge of this case is that he made sure that every single officer that was involved received a copy of the docket. Now this includes Muhola, Muhane, Makubo and Buthelezi, and also Ramuhale, obviously, because he was there at the time. So every single person had a copy of the docket, which means every single person was up to speed with what was happening in this case. Now, isn't this surprising? Because we did have Sergeant Muhola on the stand a couple of months ago, and she basically could not tell us anything about this docket. She just said the person that was the lead investigator was GININDA. She didn't have information about this docket. See how uncredible these witnesses are. Muhola, GININDA then makes it known to us that due to the disagreements that they had with Buthelezi and Makubo and Buthelezi believing that there were no intruders that entered the Kumala household on the night of the incident, and GININDA, Muhola and Muhane believing that they were intruders, they sort of went their separate ways with how they conducted the investigation. And he says this is how then case 375 came into play. Now, there's an interesting thing about how GININDA talks about case 375. He says that he had not had sight of this docket until the 20th or the 29th of January in 2020, when the docket was sent to the DPP. Now, that's the first time he saw the docket. He said that he did peruse the docket at that time. And the interesting thing is that later on, as Baloyi continues to lead him, Baloyi then asked him, so you had no sight of the docket before 2022? And he says, yes, he had no sight of the docket before September 2022. And in September of 2022, the case was already in court. The contradictions, the lies, because earlier on you said that the first time you saw the docket was in 2020. Now you're telling the courts that the first time you saw this docket was in 2022, when the case had already started. Gininda, which one is it? It does mention two other brigadiers that were involved in this case due to the disagreements that they had with Abomakubo, namely Paruman and Lewis, who were involved in the investigation, and they were said to be the coordinators of the investigating team. Gininda then goes into the factors that made him believe that there were no intruders that entered the house, and the first one being that Kelly Khumalo's cell phone was alleged to have been stolen, and he confirms this by saying that it is evidence that the cell phone was stolen because every person that was in the house on that day, all their cell phones were picking up the same tower before the incident, and also after the incident, after the shooting of Senzo, all of the people in the house's cell phones were picking up the tower at the hospital. And Kelly Khumalo's second number, which is the phone that was said to have been stolen, was picking up a completely different tower in a completely different direction, which is at Mulaleki Tower. Now, the interesting thing about this particular cell phone, guys, is one, if they were intruders and they left the house first, those people would have gotten to Basutu Hostel before the people that got to the hospital. I don't know if I'm making sense to you, but the movement of the people from the house to the hospital took them about 15 minutes because Longwetwala's car was at the Khumalo residence at 20:49, and at 21:05 he was at the hospital in clinics. Now, the cell phone of Kelly Khumalo that was alleged to have been stolen picks up Mulaleki Tower after an hour. It was at 21:59, if I'm not mistaken, after an hour. So it took the intruders an hour to get to the hostel, which is about 10 minutes away, and it took the people in the house 15 minutes to get to the hospital. It doesn't make sense to me. It does not make sense, but that is what the first factor Gininda mentions as to why he believed that they were intruders. Another thing with this issue of the cell phone is that although all the people in the house were said to have gone to the hospital, there was an uncle, even though he hasn't come to testify before the court, there is a statement that confirms that there was an uncle that was left at the house. I'm not saying what, but if there was a person left at the house, that cell phone could have been taken by that person to the Mulaleki Tower, just saying. Second factor that Gininda mentions, which made me laugh so hard, is the issue of DNA. He says that he believed that there were no intruders because there was a hat that was found on the scene that was said to be the hat that belonged to one of the intruders. Now, the hat was tested for DNA against the people that were in the house, and none of the people in the house were a match for the DNA that was found on the hat. But now the surprising thing is that DNA never matched the people that are before the court either. So what is Gininda trying to say? I mean, all the people in the house were excluded via DNA from this hat, and the people before the court were also excluded via DNA from this hat. So how do we have the right people again? The third factor that he talks about is the issue of Longwe Twala's tracker. Now, he does say that there was an assumption that Longwe was the one that shot Senzo, but due to the tracker information that shows that Longwe went to the hospital, he believes that Longwe couldn't have shot Senzo. That is the third factor. And then the fourth factor is the fact that there are eyewitnesses that say that they saw two people running down towards the park, that being the neighbors of the Khumalos that say that. And he even goes as far as saying the neighbors and the Khumalos don't have a relationship. That's where I was like, no, Gininda, actually, if they're neighbors and they've been neighbors for long, they probably have some sort of relationship. Another thing that Gininda testifies about is the issue of AfriForum and how they have such a good relationship with AfriForum till today. And AfriForum has been basically the middleman in the communication between the Meyiwa family and the investigating officers. Now, this is where the crux of the matter actually is, where Gininda starts to talk about the communication that he received in 2019 in June. He says that he was contacted by the commissioner at the time, and he was told that there is a person who has a lead with regards to the Senzo Meyiwa case, and this person was Constable Zungu. Now, Constable Zungu, we all know about him. I have a video on my channel going deep into Zungu's testimony, but this is when Gininda now introduces the Zungus into the myth. There is Zungu the father, Zungu the son, right? So he says that in June in 2019, the commissioner called him. There is a person that has information with regards to this case. Gininda then organizes a meeting. He meets up with Constable Zungu, who tells him this. Zungu says, I have a source that knows the people who are responsible for what happened to Senzo Meyiwa, because he overheard them speaking so, right? And then Gininda then says to Zungu, okay, since you have a source, I need to know who the source is. Zungu then allegedly tells Gininda that the source is his father, who is in KZN. Now, Gininda then says to Zungu, I will need you to bring in your father so I can question him and talk to him, because I need to have direct confirmation of this information. Now, Zungu says he was terrified for his life, terrified for his father's life, and Zungu basically disappeared on Gininda. So Gininda was unable to get a hold of Zungu from June up until November. Now, when he eventually gets a hold of the Zungus, Gininda finally meets up with Zungu's dad, Absalom. Now, Absalom apparently wrote a statement implicating accused number 1 and 2, where he says there was a fight between two Ntanzi brothers. The one Ntanzi brother said this Ntanzi brother, being accused number 2, was involved in the killing of Senzo Meyiwa with his friend Muzika Kulela Sibiya, which is accused number 1. So Gininda takes a statement from Absalom Zungu to say, okay, this person overheard the conversation and this is the statement. He brings the statement in. Now, you can understand how this statement was not going to be helpful, because it is hearsay evidence, right? Now, fast forward, Zungu comes to court and tells us that he was at the hostel. How is it possible that he was at the hostel when his father's statement says that he had direct information from the fight of the brothers, and he even said that he would call his son in Johannesburg, who is a police officer. So Zungu wasn't involved at Vosloorus. Those of you who believe that Zungu was in Vosloorus, I don't know. Gininda then starts going into the confession of accused number 1, where accused number 1 says that on the day of the incident he was with 2 people, being Marco and Makimbi Buthelezi. And before he continues with the confession, Gininda realizes that, oops, I have forgotten 2 other factors that convinced me that there were no intruders, and those 2 factors being the ballistics, where he says that Chico Twala's gun was taken in for ballistic testing and it was negative, so it made him believe that there was an intruder, because it was alleged that Chico's gun was used by Longwe to kill Senzo, and the fact that it came back negative just shows that that wasn't the case. But was it the same gun? Another factor that he had forgotten to mention is the fact that there isn't a statement in the docket that implies that Kelly or Longwe shot Senzo. And I'm just like, why doesn't he mention all the other people that were in the house? Why is it only Kelly and Longwe? Gininda then goes into some of the pictures that are part of the docket, mainly the one of accused number 3 and how he had dreadlocks, and how the dreadlocks actually indicate that he is the intruder that went into the house. I mean, how many people have dreadlocks, guys? How many people have dreadlocks? And also another thing, when the people in the house were describing the first intruder, they say that he was dark in complexion and short with dreadlocks. Accused number 3 is not dark. He is not dark, guys. Anyway, he then goes into the pointing out of Umuzi Sibiya, where he talks about how this picture was Muzi pointing out the crime scene, doing this. The defense then objects to this, saying that Gininda is now making inferences as to what's happening in the picture, where he should be using the pro forma, because the pro forma clearly indicates what the person was pointing at. It states this is what the person was pointing at, not making inferences. They are facts on the pro forma. So the defense had an issue with Gininda actually trying to explain everything that was happening in the pictures from his own inferences. The judge then says that the defense cannot stop this person from testifying because this is evidence in chief. They have the right to cross-examine the witness. And the argument is not about cross-examination. The issue is that this person is not doing things procedurally. So the defense needs to then object in order for them to actually put it on record that they don't agree with how certain things have been done. So the judge then says, no, the defense has a right to cross-examine, so the witness needs to continue. Baloyi, after the judge has made that ruling that he should continue, then says he wants to refer the defense to some certain article or an act or whatever it is. And Nisi objects and says, no, but now you can't refer us to that because the judge has already made a ruling. Now, if you're going to refer us to that, we'll also refer to something else that will counter what you're telling us now. And the judge then butts in, as he always does, and he says, no, Baloyi was trying to educate the court. Nisi then turns around and says, no, I'm educated enough. I don't need more education from Baloyi. Shots fired. Those were the proceedings for the 17th of October. On the 18th of October, being Friday, we continued with the examination in chief and leading of basically the confession of Umuzi Sibia. But before we got into that, the state went on this little mission with Gininda to discredit Makubo. Now, my question is, why is the state working so hard to try and discredit Makubo? It makes you feel like there's something in that docket 375 that Gininda and Baloyi are fighting so hard to not have see the light of day. Now, as Ginda is talking about Muzi's confession, he happens to slip up and says the name Qoniselani, which is a name that isn't in Muzi's confession. It's a name that isn't in Danzi's confession. It's a name that Gininda knows personally because, as I said in one of my previous videos, Gininda has a history with the Buthelezi brothers. He knows those Buthelezi brothers like this. So he goes on to say, no, Muzi said he was with Qoniselani and Marco. And I think he realized that he slipped up. And then he says, oh, Qoniselani's other name is actually Makimbi. And then I'm just like, why would you use Qoniselani's second name? Do you know him that well? Do you know him that well for you to use his second name in court when no one has ever mentioned it? Guys, just to touch on Muzi's confession, just to recap some of you that have forgotten what the confession says, there are so many things that are not right with that confession. So Gininda points out, Gininda and Mohola have already before the court pointed out that he was trying to mislead them in giving him the wrong names. But the names are not the only thing that's an issue. So Sibia says he was with Marco and Makimbi. Now, later on, Gininda has found out that Marco and Makimbi were in jail from 2013 up to about 2016, all right? And so therefore, they couldn't have been in Fosleras in 2014. So that's the first misleading part about Muzi's confession. The second thing is the date. Muzi says that they planned this whole thing, the alleged confession says they planned this whole execution thing and they were going to go on a Saturday, Isabat. He even says Ngesabat. So according to Muzi's statement, the shooting happened on a Saturday. So not only are the names wrong, but the day is also wrong. Now, this is the point where it gets really, really tricky because Muzi also mentions that the vehicle that they used to go to the crime scene was a white Polo. Now, guys, this issue of the Polo is a big, big problem because I don't understand how the state wants us to believe that the Polo that was used was silver because Zungu saw it at the hostel. But let's get into the information about the Polo. Now, Baloyi makes Gininda read some traffic fines for accused number 5, right? Those traffic fines are actually dated in 2016. Now, how are you corroborating the tickets from 2016 to an incident of 2014. Now, the second thing that's an issue with regards to these particular tickets is that one of them is for a white Polo. But GININDA says, no. The car that was used on the day of the incident was silver. So Muzi has misled them for the third time, basically, in the color of the car. And then with accused number 5's tickets, there's a second ticket. So the first one is for a white Polo, and the date on that one is the 9th of February in 2016, which is 2 years after the incident. The second ticket that's there is for a silver Polo, and it's also 2016. However, the date is the 20th of March, a day before my birthday. So there's 2 Polos. But yet the state chose to use the silver Polo and is saying that Umuzi is wrong for saying it's the white Polo. But accused number 5 is associated with 2 Polos. Now, the funny thing about both the Polos is that he isn't the owner of the Polos. Those were hired vehicles in 2016. Now, how are you trying to say that this person had the same car in 2016 that he had in 2014? Guys, come on. Come on now. And also, I know that it is 2 years later, but the car that's closest to the date is actually the white Polo. That's closest to the date of the incident is actually the white Polo, which was where he received a ticket on the 9th of February. And then this one is in March, which is about a month later that he receives a ticket in a silver Polo. But the closest date to the incident is this one, February, the white Polo. I don't know how I don't know how GININDA worked this out, guys. Again, there was an objection by the defense saying that GININDA keeps doing this thing of making inferences out of circumstances that are not facts. And Mnisi objected to that. And as Mnisi objected, Mshololo also says, no, I agree with Mnisi in objecting because GININDA wants to be part of the problem. He's now wanting to explain. What happens is that when the defense objects, it's a discussion between the defense, the state, and the court, not the witness. But GININDA wants to be part of the conversation. So Mshololo then says, if that's what is going to happen, if that is what the court wants, then they need to put it on record that GININDA can be part of an objection now. And I was like, one thing about Mshololo, she's coming for the judge. She's coming guns blazing for the judge. As GININDA is about to wrap up with the confession of Muzi Spiga, he touches on the fact that Umuzi, it was the first time that he was arrested in May of 2020 with regards to this case. And I'm like, why are you lying though? Because 3 people, not 1, not 2, 3 people have confirmed that Muzi was arrested. In 2019 for this very case. The first person being Muzi himself. He says he was arrested, then he was released. The second person who corroborates his version is Makubo, who says, yes, I was called to Klurkop, where I met with Lishabane and Sbia, and Muzi was there, and Zungu was there. And the third person is Uzungu himself, who speaks about Klurkop, but leaves out the part where Muzi was part of the conversation. So, GININDA, why are you saying it's the first time? Don't talk about things that you know nothing about. Now, the highlight of GININDA's evidence in chief for me was when he went through the photos of the money in accused number 3's phone. Now, there are 3 photos depicting money, large sums of money on accused number 3's phone. The one photo is dated the 16th of August in 2014. So now my thing is, all these people refer to the incident happening in October. Even the call about the hit was made mid-October. And there's a picture of money already in August. Okay, let's not focus on that. So the first picture is on the 16th of August in 2014, where the title is written Ikukulum Shaba on this money. The second one is on the 2nd of September in 2014, and the title of this one is written Imbande Yesono. And the third one is, it doesn't have a date on it. However, it's just like a couple of 100 rand notes on the floor, bundles on the floor. And the title on this one is Ngiofanini Nkoshe, right? Now, the interesting thing, I don't know whether GININDA deliberately did this or it was unintentional, but he then says they then found the same picture on Longwe and Kelly's phone. And all along, we've known that Kelly had the same picture because they want to paint her as the mastermind. But then now they're seeing the same picture on Longwe's phone. Sus. He then goes on and on about how all this information in the confessions is information that he couldn't have known. Only accused number one would have had knowledge about this information. So basically, it's not possible that he didn't write this confession. This confession was indeed written by accused number one. But my question is, with all the inconsistencies in this confession, is it really a confession? Is it really a confession? Anyway, they then asked for an adjournment. It was still early. It was still early on Friday around 1 o'clock when they asked for an adjournment. And I was so irritated with the defense who agreed to adjourning early on Friday. Guys, this case has dragged on for far too long. I'm a person who doesn't believe that the state has a case in this case, so therefore I automatically fall under team defense, right? But they need to be called out. They're becoming so lazy and they don't want to work on a Friday. It's really disappointing. Already this case has dragged for so long. We already know that GININDA is going to be off next week to go write his exams. Tell me, why are they agreeing to adjourn early? Why are you agreeing to? There's already a lot of time that has been wasted. You're wasting more time. Next week we're going to have an adjournment on after the 23rd for Ginda to go write his exams. Why couldn't we utilize the hour or hour and a half that we had after lunch in order for us to continue with Ndanzi's confession, so that by next week cross-examination can begin midweek sometime? I was so bored. But anyway, those were the proceedings for the week. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that you enjoy your weekend, and I will see you next week. Bye.